Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we'll be going over everything we learned in the Panel from Hell update with Larian. But first things first. We have our first targeted early access date for September 30th. During the panel, it was explained that the primary reason for the delays outside of COVID restrictions and precautions is basically because they are being as thorough as possible. Every time an idea comes up that becomes implemented into the game, they have to ask, what if this? What if that? What else does this new thing affect in the game so that we can make sure it fits correctly with everything else that's already in it? This diligence by Sven and his team is something that I am really grateful for because it just further reiterates how dedicated they are to making this the best game they can possibly make it. The panel itself was hosted by Geoff Keighley from Summer Game Fest with Chris Perkins, the principal game designer for D&D, Adam Smith, the senior writer for Larian, and of course, our knight in shining armor, Sven Vink, the creative director of Larian. Also, as a little side note, the Reddit community recently elevated Sven to an otherworldly warlock patron. The post is pretty neat. I'll have to make sure to put a link down below. May he watch over us all during our time within early access. Oh, and one more thing before we get into the recap. We also got confirmation that Emilia Tyler will be voice acting the narrator for the game. Congratulations are definitely in order for her, as she has done some awesome work in the industry over the years, and you all should definitely check her out. All right, without further delay, we will be going over everything split into a few categories. Some basic information, just a little bit of reiteration, some new gameplay stuff, a little bit of story updates, and of course, the quick Q&A the guys had with chat. First off on our list of new basic information, we of course will be starting at level 1 with the level cap during early access going to level 4. The team talked about how you as the player at level 1 won't feel as weak as you would in a traditional D&D game, and that on your way to level 4 you would have gained meaningful class abilities and spells, as well as starting to delve into your subclasses. The tutorial area for the players is still being worked on, however Act 1 of the game is complete, and in general optimization and balancing still needs to be done for those areas. All of that, of course, is estimated to bring us to over 20 hours of gameplay. During our time in early access, Sven and his team will be paying close attention to the analytics of the game, seeing where we die, what spells we use, where we use them, and so on. This is something they did for DOS 2 back when it was in early access, and it ended up being very integral for the development of the game. So when September 30th finally arrives, make sure you hit the yes button when the game asks you to submit analytical feedback. Multiplayer functionality will be available in early access, however, split screen playing will be facilitated at a later date. One thing Sven talked about that I think he is fairly proud of is he gave us the numbers for comparison between how early access for DOS 2 was compared to how early access for BG3 is right now. BG3 currently has over 80 potential combat scenarios versus just the 22 that DOS 2 had. As far as dialogue goes, DOS 2 had just under 18,000 lines of dialogue, while BG3 has just under 48,000 lines of dialogue. As far as spells and actions, DOS 2 had just 69, while BG3 currently has 146. And lastly, for character quantity, DOS 2 had only 142 characters, while BG3 currently has 596 characters. Although they said it was an intellectual challenge for them when they first created DOS 2, they acknowledged that fulfilling this same task for BG3 is a much higher level thing to do. And one thing to remember is that we as players, we most likely won't see all 48,000 lines of dialogue. Those massive numbers are just a testament to how versatile and responsive the world is to our actions and choices as players. Adam Smith explained further that what is really important to them is making sure that those lines of dialogue have quality and are responsive and interesting. They want us as players to feel like we're having conversations and not just reading from a script or a speech. Adam Smith, of course, continued on to say that he implores us as players to explore the evil routes during early access so that we can see all of the nice dialogue and story that the evil path has to offer. So, even if you've never played an evil character and you're just a righteous hero of justice through and through, just for the sake of early access, be evil. Just this once, be evil. And last on our list of new basic information, just remember that early access is meant only for the players who just want a quick look at what the game will become, and for the players who want to be a part of the development process of version 1.0, just giving feedback to Larian on the forums and just helping to shape the game we all love. Next, we thankfully don't have much in the way of reiterations. Adam Smith, as always, has his eyes on the BG3 subreddit. Early access will have all 5 of our current companions available, and the release platforms are still PC and Stadia. Now, let's go over the gameplay stuff we got to see. We found out that Rangers in general are being reworked for the sake of the game, and got a glimpse at the Find Familiar ability that Rangers will be getting. For the moment, it looks like it'll count as a cantrip, but it will give the players a handful of options to choose from when summoning the familiar. Pets in general that the player controls will not have a tethered leash or any sort of minimum distance that they can travel. However, they will not be able to open doors on their own. We also found out that animal handling and speak with animals will of course function completely on their own within the game. Speak with animals will just allow for us to converse with the animals similar to what we got to see in DOS 2, and animal handling will have its role to attempt to convince an animal to do something. Segueing from that, we learned that animals like the owlbear we got to meet during the panel will be an opportunity for people with these 2 abilities to have different options when dealing with animal encounters. They explained that depending on how you handle this situation when meeting the owlbear, you could potentially recruit the owlbear cub into your camp. However, not all animals recruited into your camp will get along with one another. And it was explained that you could very well wake up one day to find that your owlbear has caused an unfortunate accident with one of the other animals. It also looks like we got a minor UI update since the last time we saw gameplay. As we have learned in the past, over the course of early access, we will be seeing multiple visual updates throughout our time playing. So what we see at the end of September may be entirely different from what appears on version 1.0 when the game is complete. And lastly, for our gameplay updates, we as players will have access to the Speak with Dead spell. During the panel, it was briefly showed off on a random corpse using a scroll of Speak with Dead. Although it's safe to assume that you should hold on to this spell for use with important or relevant dead NPCs, for the most part, it looks like the corpses we use this on will only be able to give basic responses based on its knowledge prior to death, as well as being limited to just 5 questions. Although I'm not quite sure how this next piece of info will affect gameplay in general, they did also specify that your target will still need to have its head intact and its jaw to be intact for the spell to work. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for, story updates. And spoiler warning in case you're trying to keep your head down until the release happens. The final cinematic was shown off. It turns out the level 1 tutorial zone will be taking place in Avernus, right in the middle of the Blood War. In the previous cinematic, the Nautiloid was fleeing red dragons ridden by the Githyanki. Turns out they ended up stuck in hell after that. This is where the game will begin for us players. They didn't want to show off too much, but they did tell us that we as players will have to regain control of the Nautiloid and use it to get back to Faerun. It looks like part of this will be having us converse with the newly born Intellect Devourer as well. The conversation between the brain and the player is interesting to see on its own, but Chris Perkins went on to tell us about the Intellect Devourer, saying that these little guys can actually melt someone's brain and then teleport inside of that empty skull and use the body as a meat puppet. Although this is accurate for D&D in general, how will this play out in actual gameplay mechanics? Only time will tell with these little guys. Without giving away any details, they did say that we will see the aftermath of the events in Descent into Avernus. It's very possible that's what the tutorial zone will be showing us when we start playing. Furthermore, we're also told that canonically, El Turil was indeed saved, and that we will also get to see the aftermath of the city as well. Now, that's not all. We got reminded that, of course, souls are the currency of hell, and that we will be able to make deals with the devil Raphael. In addition to that, we get told that turning into an illithid means we lose our souls. I wonder if it's possible for the evil route to allow us to make a deal with Raphael for power and still choose to become an illithid. The idea being that if we're gonna lose our soul anyways, we might as well make a deal. And some last few little things we learned is confirmation that Gale certainly has more going wrong in his head other than just the tadpole. I'm happy to see this lines up with my little theory about him having some sort of past we don't yet know about. Sadly, this little bit of info was not elaborated on. There will also be boulettes in the game. They're basically giant burrowing land sharks. Although they didn't show off the creature itself in the game, they did loosely say that we might be pursued by one for a while and that they can just pop up at any random time. We could be in the middle of combat with something else entirely and it'll just show up out of nowhere. And lastly, on our list of story revelations, do you remember the Goblin Crusher from the previous gameplay demo? Just take a look at his necklace. I am absolutely kicking myself because I never noticed his necklace before this panel. In the past, I noticed these symbols on the walls inside of the temple portion of the Goblin Camp, but I didn't want to make any assumptions back then. Now I can safely say, the Cult of the Absolute is 100% run by the Dead 3. Now, we can see that this is indeed a necklace of Merkel with the Hand of Bane painted on it. The traditional ways of displaying faith for these two gods isn't all that practical for goblinoids, so it makes sense to see it in this form. But when it comes to the necklace, where is Baal, you might be wondering? Remember, canonically, despite his resurrection in the Murder in Baldur's Gate campaign, the people of Faerûn technically don't know that he's been resurrected. And since Bane loves to scheme and plot, it makes perfect sense to maintain the illusion that Baal is still dead, until of course the appropriate time for him to be announced to the realms that he has returned. I still suspect that there might be a subplot to regain his lost essence from Mount Celestia. But for the moment, all we can do is wait. And as we discussed in the previous theory video, the Dead 3 have historically stayed allies with one another despite everything they've gone through. All in all, this necklace is a solid piece of evidence for what is to come and the possible involvement of Shar and some of the other deities that are tied to these three guys. Now we are finally at the end of today's journey, and we'll be wrapping things up with the Q&A the panel had with chat. I will of course be paraphrasing a bit for clarity. Question number 1. What has the team done to preserve the D&D tabletop spirit? Adam Smith responded by saying they want us to feel as if we're playing with them and not just playing with a system. As evident by everything we've learned up to this point, it's safe to say that the team really wants to bring this game to life for the fans. Next question is, what kind of feedback is most helpful? Sven answered this one by telling us we can just click yes when opening the game to send analytical data back to the team, as well as sharing our thoughts on the Larian and Steam forums. Those will be the primary two places they will be looking. But of course, as many of us know, Adam Smith tends to have his eyes everywhere on social media and pays particular attention to the BG3 subreddit. So when the time comes, make sure to do your part in giving feedback to the team so that they can make this game the best that we all know it can be. Will they be adding more races and classes during the course of early access? Sven answered us pretty much with a yes. We will be seeing more races, we will be seeing more classes, more features, and more companions being added throughout the course of early access. But in addition to that, we will be seeing a lot of change happening in general throughout early access, especially in areas where player feedback is concerned. So be sure to keep an eye out for those changes as they happen throughout early access. Will there be romance options? Adam Smith answered this one with a big yes. It will be a huge part of the game. The campsite can get a little hot sometimes, and we will indeed be seeing some of that during early access. How will backgrounds affect custom characters? Sven goes on to explain that we will of course have systematic benefits for those backgrounds, however they won't have any bearing on dialogue options. Are there more companions coming, and will it be comparable to previous Baldur's Gate games? Sven explains to us that yes, there are indeed more companions coming, but there won't be as big of a roster as we've had in the old games. All in all, they are aiming for quality and depth with these companions instead of just pure quantity. Will there be a combat log displaying all of our dice rolls, and will there be stats added to dialogue options? Adam Smith gave us a very simple yes for this one. So rest assured your dialogue options will benefit from your stats, and just keep an eye out for that combat log when early access hits. And now we've reached the final question from the panel. How interactive will the world be? As we've learned in the past, Larian will be making the world in general interactive and responsive to the player's actions, and Sven in the past had stated that exploring and interacting with the environment is something they want to be rewarding to the players. During the panel, he reiterated that a bit, and of course gave specifics that you could indeed shoot down a chandelier to hurt your enemies, but you could still hurt your allies in the same way as well. Alright gang, that has been my recap on everything we've learned during the Panel from Hell update. As always, you can reach me on Twitter at McAllik_. I also highly recommend you follow our 4 amazing hosts from the panel. I will of course be putting their Twitter handles as well as the other links used in my video in the description below. If you guys have any questions about the game or just about the lore in general, leave a comment down below and I'll be happy to answer. Until then, stay safe out there.